Kadaki, please start. You should start, Kadaki.
You hear me, David?
Yeah.
Good.
Good morning, members of the media. Good morning, colleagues of the Working People's Alliance. It is 10 hours 2, and this press conference is now called to order. I'm Kedaki Amsterdam. Let me take the opportunity to welcome you to this press conference of the Working People's Alliance. With me this morning, we have Dr. David Hines, Brother Takumo Gonsi, and Brother Dion Abrams, all members of the Executive Committee of the Working People's Alliance. We'll start with Brother Dion reading the statement of the Working People's Alliance, and then we'll go immediately into questions related to the statements, and then any other questions that may arise. Brother Dion.
Okay, thank you, Brother Kidaki, and welcome to the media, to this press conference of the Working People's Alliance. This is the WPA media release of March 28, 2023. The WPA has noted with great concern the frenzy emanating from sections of the political and social establishments since it began to hold public meetings 3 weeks ago. Statements from our platform have been picked apart and misrepresented by representatives of the state, the government, and forces sympathetic to the government. Even some representatives of the opposition have lent their voices to the public lynching and the criminalization of our party and some of its members. Brother Takuma Ogunse and David Hines have been singled out for particular attention in this regard. WPA is convinced that it has touched a raw nerve in the country's political economy, which others have been whispering about: the country's descent into autocracy and ethnocracy. We feel that if the drift is not arrested, our country will enter a state of permanent instability and disorder. WPA has watched with horror as the government has become drunk with the oil revenues which have come our way. Instead of using those revenues to combat poverty and ethnic division, the government, through its policies, has used them as tools of social and ethnic inequality. From routine discrimination in distribution of resources, to extrajudicial killings, to the criminalization of opposition members, to the ruling party's monopolization of every inch of political space, the government has ruled with an iron fist. WPA feels that that approach to governance is unsustainable in any society, particularly one with a history of ethnic contestation and division. It is with that in mind that the WPA took to the streets to dramatize its concerns. We want to alert the rulers and the country at large to the dangers ahead and to eventually cause a political reset. Towards that end, the party not only recounts the instances of social and ethnic sufferings, but boldly calls for mass resistance to this by the sufferers in the spirit of the Rodneyite principle of self-activity. Conscious of the politicization of the armed forces by the PPP, WPA deliberately raised the issue as a central factor in both the descent into autocracy and ethnocracy, and the struggle to turn back the descent in that direction. Our view is that the armed forces should not become entangled in partisan politics regardless of which party holds the seat of government. Their loyalty should be to the Constitution and not the government. Our mantra is unambivalent. Turn your guns away from the people. WPA notes the government's open instruction to the law enforcement to prosecute its members. But we remain steadfast in our quest for the political reset referenced above. The very call to the police by the government reflects the autocracy we seek to highlight. It reflects the assassination of free speech. WPA reiterates its position that we have nothing to apologize for or retreat from. We stand by our members and our message. The government's cynical resort to charging the WPA and other opposition forces with racism is reprehensible. It obviously hopes to deflect attention from its own praxis of ethno-political dominance, which invariably leads to ethnic discrimination. From the time of our formation, WPA has always taken a tough stance against ethnic discrimination in high and low places. No society, rich or poor, can truly be democratized in the context of such discrimination. We therefore feel compelled to stand with the Afro-Guyanese community, which in our opinion bears the brunt of the government's venom. WPA takes this opportunity to reiterate its firmly held position that Guyana needs a political solution grounded in shared ownership from governmental power to the economy. The PPP's shutting off the door to executive power sharing is unfortunate, but the struggle for that reality must continue. Towards that end, WPA will continue to work for opposition unity as a necessary tool in the struggle to stop autocratic governance. That is the release of the Working People's Alliance. I hand you now back to the chairman for this conference, Brother Kidak Kams.
Dennis Shimral Damrawi. Could any of the panelists, including Mr. Gunse, say whether the police have contacted any of you concerning Mr. Gunse's statements? And also, could you say what safeguards are there to ensure that your statements, Mr. Gunse, are not misinterpreted and result in an inflamed ethnic political pressure?
If I could respond to the latter first, I don't think the WPA could ensure that we engage in the public space like any other political party. And it is up to the press to give an objective interpretation of where they have doubts, to contact the party or myself or any other WPA person who may say something on the platform that they feel need clarification. In terms of the direct question about whether the police have made contact with me, the answer is no. And as far as I know, they have not made contact with any WPA person who have so far spoke on the WPA platform.
Yeah, I was trying to read the statement because I logged in a little late. But there are, at least for now, one question I'd like to ask. Sorry, the name is Adam Harris. I did not hear the statement, but did Dr. Hines refer to the 4 APNU people who criticized comments by Mr. Ogunse as slave catchers? And if so, could he explain the description of those people in his view?
At first, I must clarify that I did not refer to the 4 people who issued the statement as slave catchers. I refer to Sister Gita Chandan, who criticized Brother Ogunse or condemned him. The other 4 people did not refer to Brother Ogun's statement. They refer to a statement by Sister Rhonda Lane. And so the response, my response was directed at Sister Gita Chandan, who condemned Brother Ogunse. And my reasoning was that as an opposition facing the attacks from the government, when a fellow opposition member throws another member under the bus like that, she was not speaking on behalf of her party. She was speaking on her own behalf. I felt compelled to respond in the harshest way to her. That her actions were akin, her statement was akin to catching slaves or prisoners and delivering them to the government. You have to unmute yourself, Adam. You have to unmute.
Yes, sorry. The other thing that I'm interested in is your reaction to the opposition leader's comments that he agreed with the points identified by Brother Takuma. However, he thought that there was a wrong choice of words or that the words were somehow not appropriate. Could you or Brother Gonse say whether you actually accept that criticism, sir?
If I can address it first, I think the opposition leader is in his right to say how he sees it. And as comrades in the political struggle, I personally and the party, must take note of the position of the opposition leader. And we treat it as comradely, criticism. We understand where he operates. We don't operate. We understand the difficulties he have to deal with. We don't have to deal with. And he has to navigate his language and his political conduct consistent with how he assess the objective situation both in the party and the country. We do the same. Now, our choice of language, we're not in parliament. We are the street corner. And our understanding of the Guyanese street corner politics is that when you go to the street corner, as they say, you got to roll up your sleeves. You roll up your sleeves. When the people go to Babu John, they roll up their sleeves. Don't speak like if they're in parliament. And I'm convinced, and we are convinced that our language were appropriate for the street corner. And the test of it is not whether the government agree. The test of it is whether it had the desired effect on our constituents in the first place and across the country. And I think anybody who have lived in Guyana know that Guyana is a changed place. And I will argue that the words were appropriate and in political terms, it achieved its objectives.
If I may add, our line was simply do not condemn fellow opposition members and allow the government to use your condemnation to further persecute and criminalize our party. And so in that context, we are not unhappy with the statement made by the opposition leader because we are satisfied that he did not cross that line that we had laid down as to how we were going to deal with comrades on our side, treatment of the statement. As Brother Ogun says, we are conscious that Brother Norton has to deal with issues that we don't have to deal with, and his response has to be led by the circumstances in his party and the fact that he is constitutionally leader of the opposition. We are convinced that he did not deliver prisoners to the other side. And for us, that was where that was where we were going to part company. Had he or any other opposition member delivered prisoners to the PPP?
If I may add,
yeah,
I have a follow-up, please.
Then it's just a you see, we have to understand that the PPP's call to all of these organizations that it actually condemns the Guyana Human Rights Association, Red Thread, all of these organizations that it sees as its political enemy, that it basically doesn't want to exist in the country. When it calls out those organizations and is seeking their condemnation, what it is trying to do is to legitimize any action that it wants to take against the WPA, and not only the WPA, but any other political agent or social commentator who will be willing to be frontal in dealing with what is happening in the society, the discrimination, all aspects of corruption and so on. So when they didn't get that, as David said, they were not able to act in the ways that Jack Dew would have proposed in his press conference. And so we are grateful to those, to Brother Norton and all the others who, as Dr. Hines said, did not throw our members under the bus. It's basically that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Let me do that. Give me a minute, please. Bear with me, but please continue. I'll try to do that.
Yes, I do. Having regard to the fact that you've recognized Mr. Norton's position as the opposition leader, and also you also recognizing the language of the street corner or the views of the people of the street corner, to what extent do you believe that the lack of an explicit endorsement by Mr. Norton to Mr. Gunse's statements really waters down the effect and the impact that you're hoping to achieve?
Very frankly, we do not want endorsement from any political party. That's not what we're looking for. The endorsement that we want is the endorsement of the people. And we are convinced from the public meetings that we have had and from comments on social media and from responses to us personally and to the party, that those people have endorsed our message. We are not looking for political parties to endorse our message. That is not the kind of politics that we want to inculcate in the country, right? So we do not feel that the fact that Norton did not endorse our statement is a watering down. I think, as I said, we believe that his statement not throwing us under the bus was significant in holding the hand of the government. Mr. Jack Dio sat in his press conference and said that the police should have locked us up from the first day. He said that clearly. And they were hoping to isolate us. And the fact that we have not been isolated by the people, and the fact that the leader of the largest opposition party did not give them a gift, it was significant in terms of holding them hand. Remember, we said very clearly, this is in the hands of the people. This is in the hands of the people and not in political parties. And so therefore, insofar as the largest political party did not line itself up with the PPP to persecute and criminalize us, for us that is significant.
What's your measurement of the impact of your meetings so far?
We don't have any scientific measurement. This country doesn't do polls, and that is a matter for the media. We would like the media to go and measure. That is not our job. All we can say is that our meetings were received by the people who were physically there. I have a show, as you know, a daily show during the week. Brother Kidaki has a daily show in the mornings, and those shows have been our platforms, and we have gotten responses. And people are saying lots of those responses are from people overseas. 90% of our audience are Guyanese. Even we were surprised about that. And they have given positive responses to our message. I think they, in a way, it seems as though people on our side of the aisle were waiting for this frontal contestation with the PPP. I think prior to now, what had happened is that we criticized what the PPP did and has been doing. They've been ignoring us. But once we mount a political party platform in the open space and said clearly to the government, stop it, there will be consequences. It changes the game. So it's up to you in the media and pollsters to go out here and find out what effect it has had. As a political party, our view is, of course, subjective, and some may say anecdotal. So you, the media, that's your job. I would humbly submit.
Thank you, Kadaki. Good morning. I have 3 questions, but my colleague Dennis asked one of them. Mr. Hines or Mr. Gunse or Dion, are you losing members to the People's Progressive Party? I ask this question because of statements made by the Vice President recently, both in his press conference and at Babu Jan. He did not single out the WPA, but he did speak specifically to more persons from parties joining the PPP. And my second question, are you contesting, is this party contesting in the local government elections? Could you shed some light on that?
On the first question, we the WPA is not aware of no defection of any WPA member to the PPP since the controversy developed. In terms of the party's position on the local government elections, I think it is clear from the campaign that we have launched, where we are calling for the response of the opposition and the country to the PPP local government election, which from our point of view is a political entrapment, given their domination in GECOM, given their refusals to have biometrics, given their refusals to have a clean voters list. We believe that they have set up a path to the next elections. When they finish with the local government elections, they will rig when they finish rigging the local government elections, they will rig the constitutional reform process, because at the end of the day, in that process, whatever you say, but the government got a final say. And then they will rig the national elections. So for the WPA, we don't separate any of those three engagements. And we believe that since the government, in its own wisdom, summons the nation to a local government elections, which by its very nature, the government is asking the country and the populace to engage in intense political activity. And we felt the appropriate response to the government entrapment and their line of march is to turn the 12th of June into a day of Guyanese resistance and African uprising. That is our view. Therefore, it answers the question as to whether or not we will contest the local government elections.
If I may add, in fact, the WPA has gained members over the last 3 weeks. We are processing application for membership, and it has surprised even those of us who are optimistic and more optimistic about membership. But I think the larger question that you ask is African Guyanese showing up at PPP's events, such as the one at Babujan, and whether that means increase in PPP's membership. WPA wants to say that show by the PPP of African Guyanese at the Babujan event is cynical. It's cynical because what the PPP is doing, it is using state resources to entice African Guyanese to these public events so that it can have photo opportunities and then use that to say that they have gained African Guyanese membership. The objective there is to demoralize the African Guyanese community. And in the process of demoralizing the African Guyanese community, they are cynically saying that African Guyanese are gullible. We know the intense political and ethnic divide in this country, and that the whole notion of crossover votes is really a myth. But the PPP is hoping with these pictures at these events to say to other African Guyanese, come over, we have money to give you, we have gifts to give you. And I think that is a very cynical call to the weaknesses in our community. Because of course, people are impoverished, people are down and out, the cost of living is very high, and they expect that their government should be able to solve those problems. And if the government is not solving those problems through policy, whenever the government turns up, they will go to see what they can get. It's the same thing happened at Victoria, and we will continue to see the government enticing these African Guyanese people to have a photo opportunity and to try to further demoralize the community. We are not worried about that because I think we understand the sociology of the country. We understand the situation that African Guyanese are facing, and we understand the political gimmickry or gimmicks that is being engaged in by the PPP. I just want to add to what Brother Ogunse said about the local government elections. Of course, we are not contesting the local government elections, but we want to make it very clear, we are not against elections. We are not against elections as part of the democratic process. But we feel elections by themselves are not akin to democracy. elections are democratic procedure. Democracy is tested by the substance of the governance. You can be democratically elected, meaning a free and fair election, all right? But how do you use that election to govern? Are you going into people's villages and rather than dialogue with them, you are dismantling their homes? Are you distributing the resources of the state in an equitable manner? Are you doing anything to dissuade the armed forces from extrajudicially killing citizens? Are you using the parliament in a democratic way to ensure that the voices of all the people's representatives are heard? That is, are you democratizing the parliament, or are you turning the parliament into a one-party institution? Those examples are the test or the substance of democracy. And ultimately, a government will be tested not just by the manner in which it comes to office, but the way in which it is governed. And so we want to make clear that we do not share the definition of democracy as being simply election. But we want to say that we believe in elections as a step towards a democratic state. And we are prepared to contest elections on our own or with other partners, so long as those elections meet the test of fairness and freedom from fear. We do not believe that the electoral architecture at the moment allows for a free and fair election. We feel a bloated list of over 200,000 people is an invitation for rigging. It's an invitation. You're saying, here are 200,000 people who are not on the list. And we know that all it takes to win an election in Guyana is one seat, 5,000. And you are saying to people, look, there are 200,000 names there. All you have to do is to pilfer 5,000 and you win an election. We feel that unless we clean that list, we are not going to get democratic outcomes from elections. We feel that other safeguards such as biometrics, which has been suggested by the opposition side, but the PPP has rejected it. We feel that once you reject that, you are closing the door on free and fair elections. So we think that we have to mount, we have to wage a struggle for a clean and reputable electoral architecture. We feel that the PPP has been rigging the personnel at GECOM, for example. Up to now, they've not been able to name a deputy CEO of GECOM because they're trying to put people who are loyal to them in those positions. We feel that the criminalization of the former CEO and DCEO were meant to clear the way for the installation of people who are sympathetic to the PPP. And so the manipulation of the staff at GECOM points to the fact that the rigging has begun. And so we are very clear in our mind that we are not engaging in a rigged election, any rigged election. And so for us, if we cannot get a clean and just architecture that is agreed upon by all stakeholders, you cannot have an electoral architecture that is agreed on by one stakeholder and not the other stakeholders. You are not giving the impression of a democratic process. We have said that we need a political solution in this country, that the problems of this country are not going to be solved by elections. They're going to be solved when the forces of the country can sit down and agree to a political solution. And the way the PPP is operating in relation to GECOM and the voters list, we feel that those things will have to be part of a political solution, because it doesn't look to us as though the PPP is interested in using the democratic process to ensure a clean and just electoral architecture.
One thing, Kidaki, just one. I think we're missing one of a very important aspect of the way GECOM is operating. The minister, Daramlal, had redefined boundaries, which clearly we know would give an advantage to the PPP in the elections, due to objections by the commissioners on the that were appointed to the commission by the opposition, and the legal ramifications with the minister's decision. They withdrew the minister's decision, but then when the deliberations went to GECOM itself, the chairman backed the PPP commissioners for the exact boundaries of the minister. So that too, the tinkering of the staff, the redefining of boundaries, the unwillingness to change the composition of the list, all of these elements are clear indications that GECOM is no longer an institution that can be trusted under the PPP to deliver elections that are going to be free and fair. And going into the elections is not a win-win situation. It's totally a lose-lose situation as far as I'm concerned. And so all of the demands that we're making for by Dr. Hines that you would have highlighted there are key and critical to this process of democracy that we are seeking to bring this country out of this morass that we are currently in. Thank you.
Kidaki brother Vickery has his hand up for the longest while.
Good morning. Just two questions that I have. Since the utterances made by Mr. Agonse and the other party member, a lot of people have come out and condemned it. And a lot of people, this has now sparked a conversation about race relations in Guyana. So my first question is, what does the party propose? What method would the party propose in terms of tackling the issue of race relations? That's one. And secondly, if the government decides to act on its threat to arrest Mr. Agonse and the other party member, what does the party do then with regards to that? What is the plan thereafter? Just those two questions.
Well, you shouldn't expect us to reveal our plan, but we have stated very firmly that we are also engaged. Dr. Hines speaking on the behalf of the party. We announced civil disobedience, and we are prepared to use civil disobedience as an effective political weapon. And that would be one of our responses. And we have said it in public that when we look at the lineup of charges they have been uttering since the controversy, treason seems to be the most severe of the threats. And myself and the WPA has publicly resolved in public that once they come with treason charges, we will not treat it as a legal matter. We will see it as what it is, a political matter. And I will go in the court and plead guilty with explanation. And we will fight it from there. So that is our attitude to the charges. Now, on the question of racism, the WPA by itself can't resolve the racial problem in the country. The Guyana state, from its very origin, was built on the basis of racism. When the white people came to these parts and they met the indigenous people, they imposed a system of colonization based upon racism. And every Guyanese group that came after were subject to that system of racial domination. So race has been an essential part of our being. And if we haven't resolved it in the many centuries by our collective efforts, it is almost impossible to ask any one party or any one group, okay, to find the answer to the problem. But the WPA, from its very inception, have stated an attitude to race. We came into being after a collaboration between ASCRIA, the African Society for Cultural Relations with Independent Africa, headed by Brother U.C. Guyana at the time, and IPRA, the Indian Political Revolutionary Associates, headed by Mr. Moses Bagwan. And as a result of our collaboration, we consciously identify race as an important problem in the political equation. And we established a race commission, which we announced to the country. And where we announced that race commission, from both sides of the political divide, accused us. They said in the papers, the racists come together. Mean Guyana is a racist, Bagwan is a racist, and the racists come together. But despite that, we went into African and Indian communities and discussed the race problem with people and allowed them to express their views on how they see the problem and a possible solution. And I could tell you that the majority opinion and views were that people recognize the race problem, wanted, okay, a way out of the historical entrapment. And it is that very process that led to the formation of the Working People's Alliance. So our attitude to race has been to recognize the problem, not to wish it away, and to do everything in our power to fashion a political solution. And we have always been arguing for executive power sharing as a way to begin to, put a dent into this problem. You can't have a political system where if a one party win by one seat, they get all the power. And you know what the political power leads to in terms of economic distribution of resources. And we're not fighting for political power for the sake of political power. The racial problem and the sensitivity in terms of politics is the economy and what political power allows one side of the country to do in relationship to the economics of the country. Therefore, our attitude is that the problem could only be addressed when there's a meeting of minds by Guyanese people and Guyanese leaders and Guyanese organizations. And we believe constitutional reform that changed the governance system to one where we don't have winners and losers at the end of the elections will, in a big way, put the country on the road to begin to seriously address the problem.
If I may add, in addition to what Brother Ogunse has said, our position is that the PPP is in no mood for an improvement of race relations. They want race relations to be on their terms. And they are prepared to sacrifice race relations in this country for their dominance. And we think that that is the wrong way to go. In the absence of the PPP at the table, we are always going to be in serious social problems and economic problems in Guyana. It means, therefore, that we have to mount a concerted struggle to bring the PPP to the table. In the past, the PPP has only come to the table when their power is threatened. As recent as 1997, after the 1997 election, the PNC had to take to the streets to bring the PPP to the table. We go back to the 1960s. It was only in 1963 when the PPP under Dr. Jagan realized that his power was slipping away, that they approached the PNC with a proposal to share power. Ultimately, it's about power. We are not going to improve race relations until all the ethnic groups, including the Amerindians, feel a stake in our country. And that is what has been eluding us, where all our ethnic groups simultaneously feel a stake in the country. When the PPP is in power, African Guyanese are alienated. When the PNC is in power, Indian Guyanese are alienated. And so, therefore, we have to come to a political solution that gives constitutional and other guarantees to the ethnic masses of our country. Short of that, we are going to continue to have the kind of alienation that we have. And the fact that the PPP is either ignoring or they just don't understand how deep the sentiments of African Guyanese are against them. There is absolutely no institution in Guyana that African Guyanese can turn to and say, we have a definitive say in decision making, not the civil service, not the police, not the army, not the parliament, not the economy. And I think the PPP, we think the PPP is underestimating the power, negative power, albeit, of that alienation from country. It can only lead to instability and disorder. And that is why the WPA has come to the street corner to talk to our people and to talk to the government especially, to say we are going down a road that all of us would regret. And we don't want to go down that road. We don't want to go down that road. And so therefore we think the time has come for a political solution. Mr. Jagdio's statement that we don't share values is instructive. It means that we are alien from each other. We don't share values. That is what this one Guyana government is saying. How can you have a one Guyana where you are saying that you don't share the values of the other side? I think that is so instructive. The WPA itself was shocked that the vice president made that statement. And so it seems as though the PPP wants to go down the road of ethnic conflict. We are trying hard as a party and as part of the opposition not to go down that road. We are trying hard. And so therefore, we continue in spite of the PPP statement to argue for a political solution that gives each ethnic group guarantees of not being persecuted and prosecuted in the land of their birth. No, Svetlana is next.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Hi, Svetlana from News Source. Mr. Ogunse, you said that the 12th of June should be turned into a day of Guyanese resistance and African uprising. Could you maybe explain in greater details what exactly you're calling for here and what you hope would be the end result? What are What are you hoping to achieve from this?
And I'm going to explain it in very simple terms, because not only that I want you to understand, but I want the masses of the country at every corner to understand. What we are saying is that we have basically two choices. Either we do as the government asks and we go there and vote, okay, and return to our homes and so forth, and wait for the results, or we be politically smart and turn the election hoax against them. It is important, given our understanding of the political situation in the country, it is important that the African Guyanese find a way of making a profound political statement. And normally profound political statements are made either through the ballot box or in the streets. And we believe that the 12th of June, where we'll be disposing a lot of resources, both financial, human, and otherwise, in a mobilization for the elections, should turn into something meaningful. And in every African community, are we clear? We want Africans to come into the streets, not to the polling stations, okay? And demonstrating to the country and the world, Africans have real concerns, and we are addressing these concerns collectively so there could be no misunderstanding of where our community stands. And we want this activity primarily in African communities. One, to avoid the accusation that our rising up will offend and affect Indians. We don't want one African to go into an Indian village. We feel that since the objective is to have an African political statement, it could be achieved simply by Africans throughout the country rising up, rejecting the elections, and making a profound political statement. That is all what we want. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about politics. You either go in there, if Africans engage elections and go in the polling station and vote, they will be making a political statement. If Africans decide to stay home and don't go and vote, they will be making a political statement. If Africans decide not to go and vote, but to stand up in the streets, okay, and shout, we want freedom, they will be making a political statement. So this is how we see the engagement. And we believe once we succeed in doing that, it will change the political dynamics in the country, and it will open the possibility for a genuine meeting of minds between the political forces in the country, because there would not be any uncertainty as to where the African community stands as it relates to governance, it relates to its access to oil funds, and so forth and so forth. So that is what we expect.
And if I may, Svetlana, because sometimes, we are not guided by our own experiences in Guyana, we think that some of these things are so alien. In 1978, the government of the day called a referendum. And the People's Progressive Party, which is in government today, along with the WPA and other civil society organizations, called for a boycott on that day as a form of resistance. And we were satisfied. We were satisfied that over 80-something% of the people did not vote. In fact, foreign observers who came gave that figure, that 80-something% of the people stayed home. During that time, we didn't call for people to come onto the streets, but we call on them to make the referendum, the boycott of the referendum, as a form of resistance. So we're not inventing anything that Guyana has not done and the People's Progressive Party has not done in its time. We will just be giving them a taste of their own medicine.
Yes, sir. This is on a statement made by the Vice President on Friday at his press conference. Interesting statement. Now, Brother Ogan was there at the beginning. David, you might have been a little too young. Did you join or collaborate with the PNC to kill Walter Rodney?
No, okay. Well, I mean, honestly, I really feel a bit offended to really have to make a defense against that ridiculous remark by the PPP. More so after they themselves organized a commission of inquiry to investigate the death of the assassination of Walter Rodney. And that commission of inquiry never fingered the WPA. That commission of inquiry submits its findings, and the PPP hailed the findings as correct and accurate. So I think the commission answered the question.
Adam, I wasn't young. Well, I was young, but I was in jail. I was one of the persons that Rodney apparently was, according to the narrative, was coming to free from jail. So I was young, but I was very much part of the thing, thick and thin. No, it's a ridiculous statement. But I think what it shows is that when it comes to fighting, the PPP has no regard for language. And when Brother Ogunse, either comradely or uncomradely, was accused of going too far, we can only go as far as the PPP has gone. And look how far the PPP has gone to accusing us of collaborating to kill our comrade. You can't go further than that. So when you are engaging a political animal like that, you cannot use language and imagery for schoolboys. You have to use the same language and imagery that they are prepared to fight you with. Because that is nasty, very nasty on the part of Mr. Jagdeo. But that is how the PPP fights when their back is against the wall. So it is not that the WPA has committed an offense. What the WPA has done is to push the beast against the wall. And they're coming out swinging with no regard to language, no regard to ethics, no regard to morality. And we want to say as a party, we are prepared to meet them at the crossroads of the concourse of ideas and language and everything that comes with political contestation. We have said we are not a guerrilla force. We don't have weapons. If we had, we would have been in the hills fighting. All we have is a history, an integrity, and an understanding of the political moment. And we are going to fight with that.
I have a question, please, when you're... Yes. Based on your current forecasts, what do you expect the response to be to your call for a day of resistance?
It's already the day. The campaign, we got up to the 12th of June. So we are not at that point yet. The work now start. We hope it will intensify as they go close to the 12th and the country is more engaged in the election, the heat and politics. And at that point in time, it will be more appropriate for us to seek to make a judgment. But it's early time in the process.
Dennis, we are not unconscious of the challenges ahead. I mean, the PNC at one point indicated that it was going to contest the elections partially. I noticed a statement by the leader of the opposition last week, which perhaps cast some doubt on that approach. But obviously, if the PNC are going to contest the elections, even partially, then that in itself would not lead to a straightforward day of protest. But we are of the view that there is diversity in the opposition, and the PNC has to relate to the election from its own standpoint. And we are relating to it from our own standpoint. There is no monolith as far as political approaches are concerned. We in the WPA would like to believe that we come from a more radical tradition that does not see election as an end in itself, but we see election as a part of the process, and that we are not prepared to trade the dignity of the country just for an election, regardless of the nature of the election. So we may have some disagreements in the opposition, and that will determine, I think, and the WPA thinks, how the day of protest unfolds in the coming weeks and months.
But Dr. Haynes, why is it you cannot convince the main opposition party to be in consonance with your position if it is that you are fighting one cause?
We cannot convince another party what to do, and the other party cannot convince us what to do. I suppose the PNC is aware of our position. We have not sat down and tried to see how we can merge the two positions yet, or whether the two positions can be merged. But we are not in the business of trying to convince another party what to do. We would like some kind of balancing of the two positions, and that can only come through dialogue.
I'm on mute. Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks.
Yes, good afternoon, or good day, members of the Antonio here from Nigeria. My question to Dr. Haynes, in light of the contention of use of the biometric system by the opposition especially, I know that the government has been a bit reluctant in terms of research. But my question is, the PNCR, they have been lobbying for the use of the biometric system. Is that the same position of the WPA?
Yes, definitely. We feel every device should be used to clean the electoral process. We feel that the voters list, and we've said this before you came on, the voters list is an obstacle to free and fair election. We feel that biometrics would help in ensuring the democratization of the process. And so, yes, we support the use of biometrics. We support the cleansing of the voters list. But the reluctance of the PPP to come to the table at GECOM and to resolve that problem mean that it will have to be resolved outside of GECOM. It will have to be resolved as part of a political solution. So the WPA feels that we need a short-term political solution before the elections to ensure that all stakeholders and participants agree on the political and electoral architecture. But we also believe in a longer-term political solution that has to do with ensuring the security of all ethnic groups in the society, ensuring that the oil wealth that is going to come will benefit all of society, ensuring that the governance of our country is one in which the people have confidence in. Now, the IRI in a poll revealed that only 22% of those polled felt that the PPP won the last election and are in power legitimately. Now, that that is a serious condemnation. It means that more than half or less than half of the PPP supporters believe that it is in power legitimately. And so therefore, what it shows is that elections are not solving the deep-seated problems in our society, economic and political, and that we need that medium to long-term political solution. But we feel that in the short term, we need a political solution as far as the electoral arrangements are concerned.
Sir,
I would just want
to. Yeah. Do you think that the electronic IDs would resolve that issue? Because you see that the government has already inked agreement. So do you think that would solve the issue of elections or in terms of transparency?
Well, we went down the road of electronic agreement as a party. We haven't really studied that yet, but we went down that road at the 1997 election, and the court, so far as we can remember, led by Justice Claudette Singh, ruled that it was unconstitutional to use IDs in that way. So we don't know what is going to be the legal ramifications of that. But as a party, we have not studied the veracity of that device.
And I just want to add that because it is tied or potentially tied to elections, and given our history of electoral controversy, such a thing should have had the cooperation minimum between government and opposition. And I would say even wider than that. Other civil society organizations. That is something we really should not be done by any government as in a partisan and a one-sided way. And on the basis of that alone, we reject it.
No, I just wanted to highlight.
Mr. Ogunse, sorry to interject, Mr. Harris.
Wait 1 second. Let me just add a little to what Brother Ogunse has said. I'm Keith Branch, for those of you who don't know me, and I just want. Okay. I thought Sideways was better. I just want to say that the PPP government has just entered into a no-bid contract with a German company through a Middle Eastern company to produce a biometric ID. And that biometric identification card would even include citizens' blood type. Now, just imagine something as serious as your blood type being on a card, your DNA exposed on a card that you're carrying in your pocket. Yet that same government is saying that you can't have a similar identification, similar biometric to use in an election. So it's the question of introduction of the biometric is not one of just the constitutionality and feasibility, but it's a political issue. And the PPP sees that the introduction of biometrics not in favor of them at election time. This is something that they would continue to resist because it gave the at least a semblance of an even playing field, and they don't want an even playing field at election time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Amsterdam. I was asking Mr. Ogunse, when you said that you reject the use, are you referring to the electronic ID cards since there are no consultations?
Yes.
Okay.
There's an hand up there from Tamika Garnett, Brother Kedaki.
Hi, good morning. Tamika Garnett, Guyana Chronicle. Mr. Hine, noted, Antonio asked about the use of the electronic ID cards in elections. And Mr. Hines noted that the WPA hasn't looked into the legal ramifications of using that ID card. Has the WPA into or thought about the legal ramifications that could come out of using biometrics at elections or requiring that as mandatory in the voting process? Do you see legal resistance against that?
Yes, those who are opposed to it could want to test it in the court. And we have no objections to that. We were making a political statement, and that is why I made my colleague spoke to the political use of the ID card, and I spoke to the legal ramifications. We think politically everything should be done to ensure free and fair elections, including an architecture that is agreed to by all forces. We are, however, aware that there could be legal challenges to the use of these devices. And so at some point, we have to balance the legal and the political.
Okay, so if legal challenges could come out of the introduction of biometrics, which could even see if they are used that an elections could be rendered null and void and have to go over. Why should parties be supporting or calling for the use of biometrics or calling for the introduction of anything in the election process that could later end up tying up the whole elections in a lengthy legal battle that could overturn the entire elections?
As I said just now, there are political ramifications and there are legal ramifications. And we are not going to agree to an election going ahead because we don't want to test its legality before. Let the election wait until the legal and political ramifications are worked out by all stakeholders and all institutions in the society. As we said, an election is consequential in a country like Guyana. It's consequential. It's consequential for social groups. It's consequential for ethnic groups. It's consequential for the country's standing in the wider world. And so we have to make sure that when we go to an election, that we ensure that all, if not most, of the challenges are taken care of before the election. The last election, the 2020, it went on for 5 months. And it's easy to blame one party or the other to say it went on for 5 months. But what the 2020 election exposed is the way in which elections in Guyana are compromised. And so long as both sides simultaneously decide to challenge the results, and not the PPP made the first challenge in 2020, and then the opposition joined. And that is what accounted for the 5 months. Do we want to go to another 5 months or another 10 months? Or do we want to make sure that we all agree on the process, both from a legal standpoint and a political standpoint?
Yes, Kadaki, just to follow up on that question, I think that for some there's a fear that having to go to court to resolve these issues is a negative. It's not. I think the citizens of Guyana have a right to want to know that the processes that are in place are processes that can stand the test of time. And one of the ways of doing that is having the final legal opinion. There are several things that came out of the 2020 process that are etched now in the annals of Guyana legality, and is being referenced by both sides continuously. And if the biometric process I would say when the biometric process, because I'm sure it will have to be introduced. We cannot continue in this vein forever. When that is introduced, there are challenges. The court will decide if it takes 5 months or 6 months or a year for the court to decide. We know that that process will be in place for another generation or two until technology or whatever changes and the process is upgraded. But there's no fear whatsoever in having those challenges in court.
There's one raised hand there, I think.
No, I have another question. Yes, I have another question. I'm not sure if this was mentioned earlier because I came into the press conference a little late. What is the WPA's response to the mounting criticism and call for an apology to Mr. Takuma's remarks at the public meeting?
Well, you know, I hear this thing about mounting criticism. Mounting criticism from the PPP and its allies. You almost say that. Not mounting criticism from the opposition. To that, it's only one opposition member who publicly disassociated herself. Mounting criticism from the government and its allies. And what is our response to it? They are doing their job. We are doing our job. We have nothing to apologize to them for.
The PPP should apologize to us for having Guyana in this state.
Mr. Clive, stop.
Brother Clive is on. So
we should give him a chance.
We should invite Brother Clive to say something.
You want me to say something just for the record?
Yes.
Yes.
Because the debate has been going pretty well without me. I happened to intervene. I happened to turn into the conference a little late because of some logistical issues at my end. I had some difficulty in the computer finding my Yahoo. I don't know if it's accidental or not, but I had quite a bit of difficulty getting in and online. And what I've heard and what I've seen, of course, I know about the statement, but the discussion that I've heard so far has made me pretty comfortable that we've been able to express what we feel. We didn't discuss anything on the economic issues that we alluded to in the press statement, but that can be saved for another time. And those are equally important. And what I'm particularly concerned about is that the country has a once in a, I would say, an existence opportunity for any country to make things very different from what they were in the past. And if you look at the basic statistics in Guyana, and you make the comparison, let's say, between 2018 to 2020 and 2020 to 2022, you will see the remarkable this difference in the nature of the Guyanese economy. And I think this puts us on the cusp of a really important future. And I don't want it to be wasted. So my concern is to get the politics right so that people can make sure that when this era of oil starts to subside, that we've left a legacy of no Guyanese being in poverty. And I think this is achievable but the politics is driving a competitive search for constituents and focusing on short-term bribing and trying to win membership through giving away goodies rather than a consistent, focused development program that is aimed at the people as the primary target of the use of the oil resources. So I would not want to burden this particular trend in the press conference, which is focusing on electoral matters, voting issues and that type of thing, by their voting from it on this particular occasion. But maybe next time I could talk more substantively on those issues, which I think have a very important part to play in the future of Guyana. That's all I'd like to add to what has been said. Yeah.